Hey everybody, this is Deji.
And Chris.
Welcome to the Lot1 Podcast. On today's episode, we talk with Micah Haley about financing your film, getting investors, and much, much more. This one, you better buckle your seats because we peel back that pretty wide. Let's dig in. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Today we have on Micah Haley, who is a film financier and producer. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So for the people at home who don't know who you are yet, can you give us a backstory? How'd you get started in the industry?
Yeah, sure. So I always wanted to work in film. I remember reading Peter Bogdanovich's biography of Orson Welles at the local library when I was in like sixth grade. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And I've always wanted to work in film. Went to college in Louisiana and was ready to, like, every semester I was like, do I just drop out now and go to LA? And then magically, my last year of college, the industry came to me, and the Louisiana is the birth of the film tax credits, and it was the first program in the U.S. and it just brought all this production there. So I was able to hop on set, and there weren't any local crew yet, so it afforded a bunch of great opportunities, and it was awesome. I just dove in down there and started learning how movies are made. I get to work on a lot of really great films. This is all in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. Which was great. It was great. It was not great, but yeah, it was really exciting, wide open time. And after Louisiana sort of polished the program, Georgia copied it, and then all these other states started doing something similar. So after that, I learned production, I learned tax credits. That was my entry point into finance. My producing partner, R. Brian Wright, was one of the early lenders. In the early days of like the film tax credits, the banks would not lend against film tax credits. They didn't know if the states were going to actually pay it out at the end of the movie. So you had private lenders, and my partner, R. Brian Wright, was one of those. So that was sort of our entry point into finance. And then we sort of learned the rest of the ropes from there and have just raised new money and sort of expanded our understanding. And we're doing it. We're making movies. We're doing things.
That's awesome. I'm going to kind of go back just a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
When did you realize you wanted to be a producer? Because I feel like a lot of times people, like, oh, I want to be a director, but when did you realize you wanted to be a producer specifically?
I don't know that I ever made that choice. It's just this instinct that you have that the movie's got to get made, and you've got to do whatever you have to do to get it made. So whatever you can learn that's essential, that gives you, the ability to solve a problem. I mean, those are the thing that is the producer muscle, is just figuring out what do people need and figuring out how to give it to them. What does the movie need and how do you give it to them? And my sort of framework for that was the locations department in film. I started working in, many different departments, but in locations, you really learn about the different units, the organism of the movie itself, how it moves around, how that makes things cheaper or more expensive. And you really sort of think of every department because you have to make space for every department at every location. That was sort of the framework that I came up under. Same thing with my partner, Brian. He came up in locations, and we came up under sort of a legendary independent line producer. And he started in locations. So it actually is this really great sort of framework for you to figure out how movies operate. And all you have to do is pick up trash at the end of every day to have that honor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way. I know a lot of peers that said like, oh, I've done locations in the past, and now like they're producers. But you're so right. That translation actually makes a lot of sense, but I've never really thought about it that way.
It does, and you get to make a lot of early decisions. Like my recommendation, my MO when I started, and I'm like the total opposite of a Nepo baby. I didn't know anybody. I had no idea how it works. I didn't know anything. I just went on the internet and started searching and sending my very bad resume to
I think that's called a
films.
repo baby.
What's that?
It's called a repo baby.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
no.
And we were I mean, I was just making it up as I went along. I didn't know anybody. So, it was interesting and exciting in that I didn't know what was the right thing to do. So there was really no wrong thing to do. And Once I got on set and I worked on my first real multi-million-dollar movie, I was like, oh, so none of my skills really apply here. Like I'm like a writer and, a nerd, and really all of my skill set is in development and sort of prior to the movie arriving in Louisiana. So that was great. It took all the weight off my shoulders, and I just got to learn everything I could about how films are put together and learn finance and learn how all of these things come together to make a feature film possible. And my MO was getting hired as early as I could on any movie. So even when I would get promoted to go do something bigger, rather than sort of chase that career in that department, I would just go back to being a PA and an assistant again, just because you got hired. Like I would call LA and try to get jobs before they even arrived in Louisiana. And what's great about that is you're on board when they're still making the important decisions. You get to see how the hive mind of producers works on a movie. And, by the time all the other PAs start, by the time everybody else gets hired, you're really just sort of implementing the plan that was crafted in prep, right? So they're not great opportunities to learn at that point the essential things that you need to know to make your own movies, whether you're a producer or a director or whatever. It's sort of all producing in my mind. My greatest piece of advice I can give to anybody who wants to be a director is you need to be half of a producer. You need to understand what is required in order to, set a movie up, the basics. Of course, you want to partner with somebody else who complements your creative strengths with finance strengths or, logistics strengths. But you really need to learn to think like a producer if you want to be a successful director today, because it is, there's this great quote I posted that Jack Nicholson says in this documentary about Roger Corman, where he says, for the filmmaker paints with money. And if you don't understand money, you're basically you don't know how to make a movie. And he was like, Roger Corman knew how to paint with money. And that's really what everybody in that brain trust of director, producer, teams, like they need to all be on the same page about that, because how you plan, how you allocate the money really determines the amount of paint you're going to have in every area of the movie.
That's a very interesting way to put that. I haven't heard that before, but I think it's an interesting visual. I think it definitely tells a big tale as to what do we see on screen, and how that money is allocated. That's really cool. I kind of want to go to the basics. What does a film financier do?
So there are a handful of things that get you a producer credit on a movie. And I don't think most people know what they are. They just sort of know that there's 40 names on every movie now. So to get a producer credit, you are typically bringing something essential to the table. So it could be cast with sales value. If you bring Jake Gyllenhaal to the table, you're going to get a producer credit. It could be bringing equity to the table. So you could be representing an equity investor and bringing that money to the table. That's a producer credit. It could be the material. You could be the person that is out there working with screenwriters and optioning material and then bringing that to other producers whose forte is attaching cast or attaching money. And sometimes you have people, usually on every movie, every independent film, there's one producer who is experienced in the world of finance, which is tying all the pieces together. You might also get, like, say, an executive producer credit if you bring a pre-sale to the movie. If you bring a $3, $4, $5 million domestic pre-sale to the movie to, bona fide distributor, you're going to get an EP credit on it, maybe a full producer credit, just depending on how valuable that is to the team and how involved you are with the movie. But that's what all these people are doing, is they're all bringing an essential piece to the table. And there's got to be somebody on every team that knows how to put all those pieces together. And typically you have, it's not really credited as this. They usually just receive the credit of producer, but there's usually somebody on every movie that's just referred to as the lead producer. And they're the ones that know how to tie all of this together. Now, why are we film financiers? Why are me and my partner film financiers? Well, we sort of understand the entire organism of the independent film finance industry. You know, we've seen every aspect of it. That was really the privilege of coming up as lenders. We started as tax credit lenders and then moved into lending against domestic and foreign pre-sales, and from there into fully financing movies. And the great thing about that is, you know, it could be a $8 million or $10 million movie, and you could be doing $300,000 of it, not a lot. You could be doing a small piece at a critical time, but you get to see the whole thing. You get to see how the whole deal is structured, who came in first, who has what safety, and you know, film finance, independent film finance, it's different than a lot of people think it is. It's actually analogous to construction finance. So there are other sort of analogs in the world of finance that are very similar to film. So it is this learnable thing. And this is one of the reasons I talk about producing and finance in general on social media, is because, you know, I failed trig twice in high school. I'm like not a math genius. And yet I am sort of doing the math on all of these deals that we're involved with. And some of it gets kind of complicated, but it's not complicated because the math is hard. It's complicated because you have to think through and get accurate information at each step of the process. And you have to really think through it, and you have to look at the laws and learn about the laws. You know, people sort of assume you're just going to get your tax credit money or your tax rebate money in every state or, you know, every place you shoot in the world. That's not the case. Like, very frequently movies fall short on their credit. So all of those, you know, all of those details really matter. And the only way you can really learn that stuff is to dive into the actual laws, get to know the people who run these programs in every state, and learn about what the pitfalls are, what qualifies, what doesn't qualify. And all of those things really matter. And, you know, it may sound daunting or it may sound boring. It is sometimes very boring, but on the plus side, there's a lot of sleepless nights you don't have because you're confident in how you're going to repay your investors through a combination of tax credits and pre-sales and, you know, and everything else. So, you know, the film financier is kind of the person who ties all that together. Me and my partner, R. Brian Wright, we have a company called Intercut Capital, and essentially when you see our names on a movie, we brought some or all of the money to that movie. So unlike other producers that I call freelance producers or for-hire producers, that the way they operate is they will pull together a package, you know, a director, a couple of actors with sales value. They'll go get a domestic backstop. They'll go get some foreign pre-sales, and, you know, they'll attach a sales company to do that. And they pull it all together with a little bit of equity, and then they go shop it to the different institutional film financiers and see who wants to fully finance the movie, right? So there's sort of freelance out there. It's very entrepreneurial, and it's difficult. It's not easy. We are not that. We are typically the people that are representing the money on the movie. So if you see my name or my producing partner's name or our company name on a movie, we represent the money. We essentially represent the investors themselves. And in that sense, like, we're responsible for getting the money back. So, it is imperative that we give the filmmakers what they need to make a great movie, because that does impact the ultimate value of the movie. However, there's also an amount of restraint there and just responsibility that comes from knowing what you're talking about and partnering with good people and with good companies that aren't going to go bankrupt next week. And ensuring that your investor is paid back so you can go out and keep making movies.
There's several things I want to unpack there. I probably should have stopped you in a couple moments. If I was going to go out and convince an investor to invest in my movie, what is a good example of, like, being able to convince them that this is a safe investment and not a risky investment? Because I feel like a lot of investors see film as a super risky. Like, what is a good example of that?
So film can certainly be a very risky investment. There are a lot of people out there who are only interested in getting a paycheck and getting a movie made, and they don't really feel any obligation, ethical or otherwise, to pay back their investors. And unfortunately, a lot of those people run around and just burn people left and right. Film is super interesting, and investors are willing to accept an amount of risk in any investment, because the truth is there is no investment where there's no risk. There are always risks. Now with film, the reputation it has is that you invest in a movie and you're never going to see any of your money again. So
Yeah.
that is not the case. We invest very responsibly on behalf of our investors, and we know plenty of other people who do the same thing. And we understand what the safe value of a movie is. We understand how to make the investment safe, and I think that's a big blind spot for a lot of up and coming filmmakers, because they may know some people, they may know somebody who will put up 300 grand, 500 grand, $1 million, $2 million, but they don't know how the money comes back to the movie. How does the movie actually get paid back? And it's really simple. You essentially do it in 3 or 4 pieces. First, you shoot in a state with a great tax credit. So ideally, you're looking for an incentive that's going to give you about 25% of your budget back. So if you've got a $4 million budget, that's $1 million right there. That's collateralized and backed by the full faith and credit of a state, right? The state of Louisiana, the state of Mississippi, the state of Georgia, they're not filing bankruptcy, right?
Yeah.
So as long as you abide by their program rules, that's 25% of your investment that's safe. The next thing you want to do is you want to go attach cast that has sales value. And this is a difficult thing because you have to know what these names are, and these names are a trade secret, right?
Yeah.
And accessing cast, especially as people who come up in the incentive states outside of LA, and they didn't come up in the agency world, can be kind of difficult. But the truth is that you need to attach cast because cast establishes a base value of the movie. The names that you attach are just worth a certain amount in the worldwide sales market. And so what you can do is attach cast, and then you can go get a domestic pre-sale. So you can go to a company like Lionsgate or Saban has been a great partner for us. And they have all kinds of companies of varying degrees of reliability that will offer a pre-sale. That could be another $1 million, $1.5 million, right? Depending on the cast that you have attached. So now you've got a $4 million budget. You've got $2.5 million that are safe because you have pre-sold domestic. And then you've got another, let's see, 1.5 you've got to cover, right? Well, if your movie's in the right genre and you've got, good cast that has some foreign value, hopefully your foreign is going to be worth 1.5 to 2 million right there. So if you know those numbers and you have the right cast, the right script, the right genre, the genre really matters. Then you can go and get these pre-sales that are backed by companies, ideally a very large company like Universal or Lionsgate that's not going anywhere. And then those pay out, right? So if you can do that, you can make an investment for, whoever your investors are, who are putting up $4 million to come in, and by putting those pieces in place, what you're doing is you're creating what's called a collateralized investment, right? And the really cool thing is once the budgets get up in the 3 or 4 million plus neighborhood, you can also do what's called bonding the movie. You can secure a completion bond. And this is the same thing in construction where you are bonding, the completion of a building being built, right? It's a type of insurance that you get to ensure that the building is finished. In film, it ensures that the movie is going to get finished and delivered to a distributor, say like your domestic distributor. So those are all financial safety mechanisms that exist in other areas of the economy. And we also have them in film, right? The thing that's unique about film in that respect is that, that's hard for investors to wrap their minds around is you can just get 2 name actors on your movie and they're at all budget levels, whether you got $100,000 movie or a $5 million movie. You can attach names to your movie that give it a value that make it safe. So even without pre-sales and without tax credits, if you have cast in a certain genre, as long as you finish the movie, then you have a thing that you can sell and the cast gives you that safety, right? That's the thing that's really unique about film. There's no real equivalent to that in the world of corporate construction or whatever.
Do you want to explain just a little bit more what a completion bond is when it comes to film?
Absolutely. Yeah, so a completion bond is, which people just call a bond, is it's just a type of insurance. That's all it is. So the thing that's great about a bond as a financier is, say it's a movie that I'm not on the ground for. Some other producer that I trust is making it in Thailand, right? Well, it's really hard for me to see what's going on in Thailand. And if there's problems, it's really hard for me to go there and fix it. I don't speak the language. I don't know the local production community. So one of the things you can do is you can go to these companies. You can go to a film bond company. It's a company that's specific to the film industry, and they understand production. They have a deep knowledge of production, the risks involved. And then what you do is you actually cash flow your money as the investor, as Intercut Capital. You actually cash flow your money through the bond company to the movie. And then the bond company is watching over it. They're the ones that are making sure it's going to get done. Because if it does not get done, if something happens, then it's the bond company that has to go in and fix it and pay to have it fixed, right? And
Interesting.
They are very powerful. If you've ever worked on set in the independent film world, you probably worked on a bonded movie. Everybody's afraid of the bond companies because they have such power once that bond is closed, and they should, because they're on the hook for it. If your movie isn't finished for a certain budget number, right, then they can be on the hook for those overages, right? Where this was a big problem was during the COVID shutdowns. It was a very big problem because there were all of these movies that got interrupted, and the bond companies had to, in many circumstances, go in and pay to finish the movie because, depending on where the movie was shooting and the reason why it was shut down, contractually the bond company could have been on the hook for that. But as a financier, it's great because I can bond it, and it ensures that the movie is not going to go over budget and it's going to get delivered to the distributor, right? So I can say, these numbers make sense. This script is great. This cast is great. I like this director. Here's $4 million or here's $8 million. And I don't have to worry about that becoming $12 million because of, bad things happening on set.
The Lot1 Podcast is brought to you by the Tourist Hat Coffee Company. You know what keeps me running on those long film sets, Deji?
What's that, Chris?
Coffee. And you know what's the worst thing ever?
A swift kick in the pants.
No, bad coffee. So that's why I choose Tourist Hat Coffee Company's high-quality coffee beans. Their artisan-roasted, single-origin coffee and handcrafted blends are so much better than those stale stuff you get from those other brands.
Yeah, those things are bad.
Tourist Hat Coffee Company's coffee is artisan roasted, micro roasted, single origin, and their small batch roaster that handcrafts their blends to maximize peak freshness upon delivery. Family owned and operated. What more could you ask for from a coffee company, Deji?
I literally can't think of anything else.
If you're still not sold, a portion of each purchase goes towards contributing to some of their favorite nonprofit organizations, such as Animation Dance Community, Seeds of Hope International, and Beautiful Gate Orphanage.
These guys are good.
Make Tourist Hat Coffee Company your new go-to quality coffee choice with our exclusive offer for you, the Lot1 Podcast listener.
Oh, listen up, guys.
First-time customers can use the code LOT1BOGO at checkout to receive one free bag of coffee when you buy two. That's right, Deji, a buy two, get one free.
Whoa.
So head on over to touristhatcoffeecompany.com and use promo code LOT1BOGO at checkout. Again, that is LOT1 BOGO at checkout. Whether you work in the film industry or not and want a delicious cup of coffee, this is the perfect time to stock up on your favorite blends of coffee or try something new. I know I'll be brewing Tourist Hat on my sets moving forward, Deji. Again, that's promo code LOT1 BOGO, LOT1 BOGO at checkout to claim your buy two, get one free. Terms and conditions apply. Tourist Hat, coffee that fuels your adventure. You had mentioned a while back, too, that not meeting the tax incentives. What does that mean for the audience?
So there are movies made all the time in jurisdictions like Los Angeles that do not have, they're not shooting in a place where the tax incentive is guaranteed. For instance, in Los Angeles, the tax incentive is a type of lottery. So you apply. If you're going to shoot in LA, you apply, and if you get the incentive, great. But if you don't, there's a lot of people who just make the movie anyway, right? And as long as you're making the movie for less than what the movie is worth, then you don't necessarily need tax incentives, right? Now, as a financier, I always want them, I really do.
Yeah.
So it's 25%. And, the thing is they have only become more necessary. Most movies would not get made without an incentive of some sort. And they're very necessary. And as inflation climbs in the US and the cost of production continues to rise, you really need the incentives to offset the rising costs of everything. Everything at Walmart costs 25% more than it did 5 years ago. I think we're at not quite, but almost 25% cumulative inflation since 2020. So it's substantial, and you really need a tax credit on most movies. But there are a few exceptions. There are movies that shoot all the time in Los Angeles, or they go down and shoot in South America or Thailand or somewhere where they either don't have an incentive or they don't have a good one. And if they get the incentive, great, it's lagniappe. Or if they don't get it, it doesn't matter because the cost of production is so low, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what you're really looking for there, and what financiers look for, is, yes, the incentive is great, but you're really looking for, like, what's the delta between what the movie is safely worth and then what can you make the movie for, right? It's really just like basic economics. And in the US, it's expensive to make a movie. But if I go to Thailand or Bulgaria or Panama or somewhere, they're just different economies. The exchange rates, or Australia for that matter, the exchange rate in Australia is pretty great right now. So those are all the things that you're thinking about. It just, it's really not more complicated than, I know the movie is safely worth $6 million worldwide. I need to make it for, 5 million or whatever that number is, 4.5. Every financier is kind of different. I need to make it for that number to allow for overages or, stuff happens. Stuff happens on movies. Directors get sick. Actors get sick, things happen. I mean, I could tell you a million stories, but you need that buffer underneath what the movie is safely worth to ensure that, you don't go into massive overages. Or sometimes you have, I can't remember the director's name, but the guy who just got arrested for pocketing $17 million from Netflix.
Yeah, crazy.
Movies move very quickly and they're expensive, and you're spending money. You're spending a lot of money very quickly. More than once I've had to fly out to the middle of nowhere, open a bank account on behalf of one of our big investors. And the bank guy, he's on his own clock. He's going to lunch. And I'm like, you really want to skip lunch and open this account? And they're like, and I'm like, trust me, I'm going to move $8 million through it in the next 2 months. You want to open this account? So, it's you get into some pretty interesting circumstances in the middle of nowhere when you're making movies.
So interesting.
So how does a person get to work with a finance company like yourself?
So it's a great question. So it should be encouraging to people that are just learning this from scratch. And this is a lot of what I am trying to demystify with my social media presence. And on my website, I'm trying to just put the basic tools that you need. The thing that should be comforting is everybody needs to make movies. Even right now, after the strikes in the US, it's scary, right? Like, it's funny. I keep hearing all these narratives about how nobody watches movies anymore. Nobody watches TV. And it's like, we haven't made any in 2 years. Like, what are they going to watch?
I was like, the content doesn't exist.
Yeah, we haven't made it. Of course they're watching TikTok, right? So, it's just it's funny to see people argue about that stuff. But the thing that should be comfortable to people out in the wild is people coming up on set or coming up in production like I did, is that, first of all, there's no shortage of demand for film and television, right? Even though we haven't made a lot of movies for the last couple of years because of the strikes, the audience still wants them. People still want, nobody's complaining there's too much Stranger Things. They're complaining they haven't had a season in 4 years or 5 years, right?
Or it's not long enough. Or the story.
Yeah, or it's not long enough. It's only 8 episodes. I needed, 25 episodes. And the complaint is that there's not enough of the kind of thing that that our audiences want. There's no shortage of demand there. So what that does is at finance companies and at distributors and everywhere else is it creates a demand. You have to make movies. That's how people get paid, right? That's how financiers get paid. That's how distributors make their money is they partially finance movies or they buy those movies and they sell them. So there is this pull of demand out there. And what you're doing as the filmmaker should be thinking about what is in demand. Like, what is the thing? What are the elements I need to assemble to give them what they need, right? That's really the thing that you're sort of figuring out. And, a lot of creatives go about this the wrong way. There's just a lot of really sort of counterproductive discussions out there about how to pursue making your first film or your second film. And a lot of them, it's not about how to write a screenplay. There's plenty of info out there about that, right? Some of it good, some of it awful. But there's a lot of stuff that people don't talk about. They don't talk about how to sell the movie, like once you finish it. How do you assemble a plan at the script stage to ensure that you can sell your movie, get distribution, get your investors' money back, and get a release that ensures people are actually going to see your movie, right? That's what nobody talks about. And that's one of the reasons I started talking about it is nobody talks about this stuff. And look, this stuff was hidden behind a curtain when I was coming up on set and locations. Nobody really talked about it. And I have a lot of theories as to why, but the truth is that film is just like any business. It's very capitalistic. And if you can give the people who buy the things a reason to buy your thing, then they're going to buy it, Yeah. But there's a lot of just kind of counterproductive mentalities out there about, just make a great movie and just write a great screenplay, just make a great movie. And it will find its audience. They frequently don't. Most movies that get into the major film festivals do not get distribution. Most of the stuff that gets into Sundance doesn't. So there's this other thing. I think about it like in the line The Witch of the Wardrobe, when Aslan dies and they crack the stone table open and there's like a deeper magic that's at play. That's what you have to learn in the film industry. You have to learn what are the things that really get green lights, enthusiastic green lights, you know? You don't get a movie financed by go around and begging and giving them, just a hyper creative pitch that is confusing and rambling. And, that's not really how it works. How does it work? Well, it does involve the creative. You have to have a script that is great. And a lot of people don't know where that bar is. They don't know the kind of script that is attractive. So I'm trying to, sort of expel or explain some of that. I'm sorry on my, on my presence. One of the things I'm a big proponent of is writing a contained movie. There are certain genres that are better than others when it comes to sales in particular. But if you write a contained movie, which is a movie that takes place at very few locations. If you've come up in production, what you really want to write is like a one base camp movie. 2 base camps max. You don't want to move around a lot. You want to set up, and it's almost like in terms of the logistics of the movie, you want to adhere to basically like Lifetime movie logistics, right? You go set up, your base camp is in the parking lot of like a neighborhood school, and then you shoot at 4 houses in that neighborhood. You shoot at the gas station on the corner. You shoot at the school. You turn one room in the school into a hospital room or whatever. And, you have flexibility. It's not like every movie has to be Cube or Buried, that Ryan Reynolds movie where he's in a coffin the whole time. There is certainly art involved, but what the magic of writing a contained movie is that it can work on pretty much any budget level. If you have a movie that has very few locations and very few characters, what that does is, that may end up being a $10 million movie. It may end up being a $20 million movie. Or if you can only raise $100,000, you can make it for $100,000.
100%. Yeah.
One of the problems I see out there frequently is people that take a creative only approach to getting their first movies made, where they just write the thing and they don't pay attention, and they've never worked in production. They don't understand what they're asking the crew to do, or the producers to produce, is they just end up writing $100 million movie. Well, you've got like 4 places in town who can greenlight that,
Yeah.
and can you even get a meeting with them?
Right.
Yeah.
Probably not. So the better thing to do, just from a game theory perspective, early in your career, when you're trying to transition from Wall Street or real estate, or if you're DP on set, you're trying to transition into making your own movies, is that you want to write contained movies, and you want to put all of the money that you do spend into days and into cast. You want to have a little cast in there. They don't have to be huge. There's plenty of names you can get that are incredible actors, and I almost dropped a couple of names that you don't want to hire, but thank God I did not do that. But there's plenty of there's plenty of really phenomenal people that you can put in your movie that costs like very little, and yet give you
value.
Some safety. There's also states, not a lot of people know this, but there's states where the minimum spend. So to explain minimum spend, whenever you have a incentive program, there is a minimum that you have to spend in that state to qualify for the program. And it differs for different states. Like North Carolina, it's really high. You have to spend like $1.5 million. That's the floor to make a movie. So that doesn't make sense unless you're making like a 2.5 movie, right? But in other states, like in Mississippi, for instance, the minimum spend is $50,000. In Louisiana, if you have a Louisiana screenplay, that you've got gold, because the incentive there is like 40%, and the minimum spend is $50,000, right?
Damn.
So yeah, it's incredible.
That's pretty good.
And in New Mexico, they don't even have a minimum. So even on really small movies, like, you can come up with a plan to earn tax credits, and either, especially on a small movie, you can make a movie for $100,000 in Mississippi, say, right? Participate in their tax credit program, and you get the tax credit back pretty fast there, like fast enough where you could use it for post-production,
Wow.
So there's really a lot you can do out there. But
Interesting.
if at the script stage you have written a movie that is in a genre that does not sell well, it's going to end up just dumped somewhere, and you're probably not going to earn your money back. And it's probably not a great stepping stone to your next movie. The movie that you're making right now needs to be the movie that lets you make your next movie.
Yeah.
You know who got this right is Brian De Palma. That's always been his MO, right? He started early in his career by making, art movies, and, the guy's an artist, like, he's a deep thinker, very intellectual guy. But at a certain point, he was like, if I start doing the Hitchcock thing, I get to keep making movies. Right. And that's always been his MO, is what is the thing I can make that ensures I can make the next thing. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's how every filmmaker should sort of operate.
I've been thinking about that a lot, because Lot1, like, obviously we're a young production company. When we started straight into a pandemic, like, a lot has happened that has prevented us from, like, being able to, like, I think truly flourish. We've done some great stuff, but there's been a lot of obstacles. But the conversation we're having with some of our partners is like, okay, well, let's make the first thing that will then provide the budget, or at least the clout, to get to the next one, to then get to the next one. So maybe the first thing isn't 100% we want to make, but like, at least it'll get us to that next level, to then eventually get to the point to where we can make what we want to make. And those are the types of conversations that we've started to have, because, like, if we could convince an investor, you'll at least break even, like, on the small budgets, like $50K, whatever it is, like, that's huge. That's huge for, someone to give us faith. And then from there, being able to catapult to, like, okay, well, now can we get a bigger chunk of money because, we went and doubled your money, or at least broke even, or whatever it is. So it makes me happy to hear you say that, because it's like, I feel the same way. I truly do. Like, I have dreams of big epic movies that are going to cost like, $50, $100 million, because I love big epics like Lord of the Rings and Dune and stuff, right? Every
Yeah.
filmmaker has those dreams, but I'm not going to shoot that now. It's not going to be my first film. It's not going to be my second film. You know, you got to get there first. So
you got to get there. And also there's just a time and a place to make all your movies, you know. I think a lot of artists think about they think about assembling their oeuvre the way that they experienced another artist's filmography, you know.
Yeah.
And they think about it like it's this engineered thing, and they're like, I made this movie and this was the ultimate expression of whatever. Then I decided to follow it up, you know. And really that's all in an invention of an electronic press kit. Those are publicists that are coming up with that, right? So the real truth is there's a bunch of movies that people try to make that die, never see the light of day. They accumulate, you know, too much money and turnaround costs, and nobody wants to pay that bill to keep that movie going. And that's just not how it is. It's messier. It's more like at any given time, you have 2 to 5 projects that you're trying to push up a hill at one time, all with different entities, and you're pushing and trying to make it happen. And eventually, you know, movies get made, right? And it really is all about setting up your next movie, right? And the best way to do that is to get your investors' money back. Most people who invest in film, they're not expecting some massive return. I mean, this is actually a big red flag when you're talking to investors, especially non-institutional investors, right? So just some mom and pop doctors group or whatever out in Skokie, Illinois, they may be interested in investing in movies. But if you go in and you tell them some story about the Blair Witch Project and how it costs whatever 20 grand and made 100 million, they just don't believe you. It just sounds like unicorn fairy dust, and they don't believe you, right? So the good news is you don't have to promise insane things. Like most people are just okay getting their money back. A little profit in there is cool. But, you know, most people don't go into film expecting this to be some, you know, the equivalent of a Silicon Valley startup that becomes a unicorn.
Yeah. It's the clout. I helped make that movie. That looks cool. I like this. I did that. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, completely.
You mentioned that there are genres that don't do well, and there are genres that do better. Can you give us the very bottom, the one that does not do good at all, and then maybe the top or the second from the top?
Yeah, sure. The worst genres are frequently the ones people want to start their careers with. They want to make dark dramas. They want to make Winter's Bone, Manchester by the Sea, you know?
Yeah.
I love those movies. I mean, one of my favorite movies, one of the movies that made me want to go into the industry was Magnolia, right?
Yeah.
Don't bring me Magnolia. I'm not financing that movie. You know, but why was that movie made? How did PTA get that movie made? Well, a couple of reasons, but one of the biggest ones was it's his blank check movie, right? He made a ton of money with Boogie Nights, which was not a super expensive movie. He made a ton of money, ton of awards, and then he got to make Magnolia. But to do that, he still had to get Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
So, you know, dark dramas are really difficult. Coming of age dark dramas, those are really difficult. If you make your low budget version of that, there's a very good chance it's just going to get dumped on an aggregator. You're going to end up on Film Hub or YouTube or something, right? Yeah. There's just not a lot of appetite there. One of the best genres is action. Action genre is incredible. I say that, and in a lot of people's minds, they think of the action section at Blockbuster or whatever, and they just immediately think of Jean-Claude Van Damme, you know, about to knock somebody's teeth out. But in truth, action is a very big parent genre, right? And whenever I talk about genres, I'm really talking about the big parent genres, right? I'm talking about which are literary genres, really. So I'm talking about action, horror, sci-fi, thriller, romance, comedy. You know, these are big, you know, capital letter parent genres. And you know, some of them have really problematic subgenres. So you know, or crossover genres. There's a lot of like hybrid genre stuff out there. That's another mistake that a lot of young filmmakers make is they think the only way to start their career is to get into Sundance. And they think the way to get into Sundance is make a strange, unique genre, like crossover, hybrid, weird movie where it's like 9 things at once. That basically guarantees you're not going to be able to sell your movie. You know, because one of the best thing for sales, especially when you have, you know, no cast or very, very, you know, low value cast, is the clarity of the genre. The fact that it's clearly a horror movie, clearly an action movie.
Yeah.
Action is just the universal language of movies, you know, and the more you have in any movie in general, the better it's going to do with sales. So, but yeah, it's a big tent. I mean, under the umbrella of action, you've got The Raid, but you've also got Smokey and the Bandit. Smokey and the Bandit's an action comedy.
Yeah.
The Blues Brothers, tons of action in that movie. You know, like how many cops how many cops fire a gun in that movie? Pineapple Express. Action comedy is an incredible subgenre. It's a subgenre of action. Tons of flexibility. If I was writing comedy as a genre can be good. It's primarily cast dependent now, and it's not really a theatrical genre right now, right? So you don't really have that opportunity to go theatrical, even in a unicorn scenario. So, but certain hybrid genres, they're great. Action comedy is fantastic.
Yeah.
You know? And if I was a comedy voice, that's what I would be doing is I would be taking all my jokes, shoving them inside of an action movie, coming up with a great high concept, Pineapple Express like action comedy.
Does comedy do well in foreign sales?
It depends. It depends. Okay. It depends on the type of comedy, you know. A sort of moody, hipster, subtle comedy probably not going to do great, you know.
Yeah, got it.
But action comedy does really well, you know.
Yeah.
So it just depends. And you know, there's a reason so many theatrical releases, so many big budget movies are action movies. In many ways, action comedy is the predominant genre of our time. Most of the Marvel movies are action comedies.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
Yeah, so it's just a really big tent genre. But there are certain genres that are just like mixed results. I mean, you know, I made this Western a few years ago called The Old Way with Nicolas Cage. It was his first Western. And super fun throwback Western, kind of similar to True Grit. That movie, no way I'm touching that if Nicolas Cage is not in it, because Westerns are very weak for foreign. For whatever reason, foreign audiences don't want them.
Yeah.
But Nick Cage
is a very American thing, like a very American type of movie.
It is, but I
Right?
have mixed feelings about it because for years the U.S. film industry was the world's film industry, right? And we exported just hundreds and hundreds of hours of movies and television that was all Western content. But for some reason, only a handful of countries really love it. North America loves it. So, you know, Western can work if you get a big, you know, A+ list movie star like Nick Cage, but you know, it is a very difficult genre to make work right now because it's not good for foreign.
Yeah. Interesting. You said originally before, you know, there are different types of producers. There's the ones that are pitching, and then there are the ones that are receiving the pitches, you know. So when somebody is pitching to you, what are you looking for in that pitch? So
when they're pitching to us, it depends. We have more flexibility and sort of levers we can pull now than we've ever had. But for whichever entity you're approaching, whether it's Intercut or any number of other companies that can bring financing to the table, the first thing you need to do is figure out what they do, what they want, right? Some companies, they only fully finance movies, right? Some companies only do certain genres, like they only do action, or they only do, you know, I know one company where all they do is like period female-focused movies, right? So you got to figure out what they do and at what point in the packaging process they're looking for projects, right?
Mm.
There's a lot of companies that are more debt focused, so they need to see a package, when it's pretty well developed and almost ready to shoot, right? There are other companies that just take stuff in at the script stage, and their role is helping to attract the cast, right? So there's a lot of companies, maybe it's like this is why directors form their own companies. If you're Michael Bay or whatever, you go form your own company because they're going to go get scripts and develop stuff for you. They know what you want. And then at the right time, Michael Bay is a named director and he can go get the cast he wants. And then they take that package somewhere else, right? Some finance companies, some production companies, they're cool with just a script. Some need a script director and one name. Some need a script director and two names, right? Some need a script director, two names, a plan to shoot in a tax credit state, a full budget for that state, a domestic pre-sale, and half a foreign pre-sold, right? And then they come in at the end of that process and finance everything, right?
Yeah.
For us, we have a lot of flexibility and we can make smart plays and we can do a lot of things other finance companies can't do just because we don't have the bureaucracy, right? So, we can do a lot of cool things, but we also don't do the massive volume that some companies do. I mean, some companies do incredible volume. They have a lot of money that they have to put to work and, they just have like a little bit of a different approach. But a lot of what I'm trying to share on my website is it's just the nuts and bolts of what you need to bring to these companies, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are really bad at this. So what I have on my website, and I have these courses, and essentially what they are is they're the videos I use to train our partners, our employees. Right. So, and the first three I have up right now, they really just tell you how to put together the basics of a package. Right. So the first one, called How to Get Your First Movie Made, it's really a crash course in development. It tells you all the genres, like which ones are good, which ones are bad. It's how to set the table at the script stage, right? What kind of script, right? How many pages, right?
Yeah.
A script that has 100 pages has a radically better chance of getting made than one that's 120 pages. It's not close. Like anybody that disagrees with that, they either don't know what they're talking about or their whole career has been in the studio streamer ecosystem, where it doesn't matter as much when your only buyers are studio streamers. But there are all these other companies, all these other independent entities out there that make stuff or package stuff independently and then either go get it independently financed and they sell it to the big distributors, or they go take it to, once it's packaged, they take it to, a major or another company to finance it. So there's lots of ways that these things that can kind of come together, but there are certain things that are just facts. You can write down the type of genre, the type of roles. Like there's a certain type of role that needs to be in basically every one of your early scripts. And it gives you maximum creative flexibility to be able to cast your movie and thus build the sales value and thus make the best movie, right? And there's a lot of stuff like ensemble, like I see a lot of ensemble movies floating around. There's a lot of people in like the horror space. They'll go watch Scream and be like, Scream was great. I want to write my Scream, right? So they write this movie that is an ensemble, a twisty ensemble, but they forget that Wes Craven made that at the height of his powers. He could do whatever he wanted, more or less, right?
Yeah.
So you can't do that on your first movie. There are, it's not that there are rules. I mean, there's always a way to break the rules, but what's in my first course, How to Get Your First Movie Made, is like, it's the real rules. It's the stuff that really matters. It is more or less the lens that I look at every project that comes into our company. I look at it through that lens, right? And it's informed by years of working underneath a line producer. It's informed by selling our movies, interacting with distributors and sales experts whose expertise like far exceeds my own. And what it does is essentially gives you a path. It gives you a mold that's very flexible. I mean, you can tell many kinds of stories inside of it. And there's lots of case studies for all these random movies that you would not think fit these sort of guidelines. But what it does is, if you follow most of these rules, is it stops you from getting jammed up down the road. It stops you from getting jammed up at the casting stage. Certain types of scripts, you're never getting an actor with sales value to say yes. The role that you need to cast up, you're not getting a yes. And there's certain reasons why, right? So, that's all predictable at the script stage. There are certain movies, they're not getting sold. The distributors will not buy them, okay? And you can know that at the script stage, right? But where do you get that info from? There's no books that I know about it. I learned it just from working in finance circles and learning it, essentially a form of apprenticeship. And so that's kind of what the first course is it helps you pick a script or develop or write a script from scratch if that's what you're doing. The second one is about pitch decks. Like pitch decks have become a essential part of getting a movie made. I mean, they are incredibly powerful. Like you have I know movies that got theatrical releases that got greenlit off the pitch deck alone. Like they're that powerful. And usually everybody wants one, everybody wants to see one. It's shorthand. It lets them know what your project is. And it lets the decision maker decide if your script is worth taking a closer look at, if your project's worth taking a closer look at, rather than what would happen if you just send a naked script, which is it gets kicked to some junior agent or assistant. They read it and then they're the expert for the whole company on it. So whoever wants to, know about that script, they just go to that guy who read that script and ask him about it. The pitch deck is this point of leverage that lets people see what your movie is, what it can be, and whether or not it's right for their people. There's a case right now. There's a great director I've become friends with, and I actually met him on TikTok a few years ago. And I've sort of been helping him out and telling him, like, look, this is kind of what you need to do. And it's been awesome to watch him go from getting no traction to directing his first movie. Now he called me today, super excited. He's like, oh man, this huge A-lister is about to read this script, right? He's about to read the script. He's going to say it. He would give me 7 days if he likes it. And I was like, well, that's great. And he's like, his team is telling them he needs to do this movie, right? It's like, how do you get to that point where, he's never worked with, I mean, this actor is a true A++ lister. How do you get to that point? How did he get to that point? Yeah. He got there by having a pitch deck, right? And in fact, at one point, there was all this interest in the pitch deck, and what they were telling him is, the pitch deck is the movie we want, but the script doesn't quite match the pitch deck, so we need to do script revisions.
Whoa.
So, because there wasn't quite alignment there, right? But that's the magic of a pitch deck. It's like a fallback for your movie, for your screenplay. Yeah. Everybody will look at a pitch deck, but most of them are bad. I get them every day and they're awful. I mean, they're so bad. In my, my little video course on it, like you get to see some of the not great ones. I mean, they're bad, even some of the ones that are professional decks or whatever that I see from people who do this sort of professionally within the industry, they're not great. They're not great. And they sort of miss some of the basics of what makes a deck great. And, but there are some incredible ones. Like there are some at the bigger levels, the bigger production companies, they'll spend 10 grand, 15 grand on a AAA pitch deck.
Wow.
And they're phenomenal, and they get those movies greenlit. They really do. So there's no other resource out there like that one. It's every director who comes into my orbit that wants to work with us, or I think is interesting, or I see a film or a short or something they did, and I'm like, you're kind of on your path. I make them take that because that's all you really need is the right script in the right genre that's castable, that's sellable, and a pitch deck to go with it. And then you got to send it out into the world, right? And that's what the third course I have up right now is it's how to actually submit your projects, right? Lots of the info out there in the internet, and this is why I spend my time doing this, is it is kind of selfishly to have better incoming projects, less crap I have to sift through, because there's all these people out there that just they don't know where the bullseye is at all. Yeah. Like they don't understand what finance companies you're looking at. And here's the key to it. Okay. When you send me your script, your pitch deck, right? And you send it to me in an email, right? The email itself is part of that submission. Okay. The bar is it good enough for me to just forward it to a partner, right? If I can just forward it to a distributor as is and be like, hey, if I stick this actor in it, will you give me a $2 million MG, right? Then it happens that day, right? If I have to turn around and say, the deck is not where it needs to be, right? Reorganize your email. It looks like, you ate a bunch of crayons right before you made this thing, like wingdings have no place in your email submissions, right? That's the goal. Is you should be empowering the people you're submitting to, whether it's a financier like me at Intercut or a distributor or a major company. I mean, even a lot of people don't understand this, but when you go pitch a company, even if it's like Blumhouse or some big company that does have the facility to independently finance it if they want to, they usually don't commit on the phone. What they do is they hop off and then they call you later. And the question is what happens in between, right? They turned around and showed your thing to somebody else. The distributor they have an output deal with, right? Whoever gives them the green light, that's who they turned around and talked to, right? And then they come back to you and they mirror that green light. So that is the power of having a clean, professional, like first-rate submission. And that's why I started with these 3 courses is like it's literally just a cheat sheet to empower the people that you're submitting to turn around, give it to their talent, give it to their investor, and you'd be surprised how many doors you would knock on that you don't know are finance adjacent companies, right? You don't think of them as financiers, but they have a relationship with us or they have a relationship with another institutional financier. And so they turn around and they're just like, hey, look what I got. Do you guys have any interest in that? And if I kill it right away, you don't hear from them again, right? But if I say, yeah, that actually works for this guy. This is why, it's kind of a joke to ask financiers to sign NDAs. Like I get really green people occasionally who are like, I'm not giving you the script unless you sign an NDA. And it's like, I have to show it to 10 people. Why would I sign a non-disclosure agreement when the whole reason you're bringing this to me is to disclose it to as many distributors, potential actors as I can?
Yeah, I guess that makes, yeah.
So, but that's the whole thing is if you can give them what they need and learn what that is, and you can learn just by asking, you can submit a script, submit your action script or your rom-com, and when they turn you down, hit them back and be like, you're not interested in this. What are you looking for? And they'll tell you. I mean, what incentive do we have to lie?
Yeah.
We're actively looking for the things that we need and we know we can get across the finish line faster, right? So that's kind of what I'm trying to do on the internet is just make this stuff easy to access, you know?
Totally.
So and the other areas that are of interest that are next on my radar are distribution. That's a major issue, I think. And there's a lot of noise out there and it's hard to see who to get into business with. That's a really sticky area. So I'm hoping to shed some light on that soon.
Wow, that's awesome.
You're so much
I have a lot more questions for you.
Yeah, dude.
But we don't have any more time. Man, thank you so much for being on the show. Before we go, though, Chris has his final question that he asks all of our guests.
Yes.
Sure.
If you had... Actually, how should I phrase this? Because normally I ask... Like, you're a producer, right? But you're a financier. So normally I'd ask, like, hey, if someone wants to get into finance, how should they become a financier? But I think I'm going to ask you, if you had one piece of advice for a filmmaker out there who is trying to get a film made, or send it to a distributor, what is that one short, sweet piece of advice you could give them?
You need a fantastic script in a strong genre. That's what you need. And if you don't know what I mean when I say fantastic, you've got to go read more scripts. It should be self-evident how good they are, but they need to be in a good genre. It's got to be in a strong genre. The theatrical genres are really the strongest. right? If it's getting a theatrical release, especially if it's a very popular genre for theatrical releases, those are sort of the safest genres. So that's really the best thing. The hardest thing, even when you can get your hands on the money, even when your cast relationships have grown and you can pull in talent just through friends and stuff, the one thing no one can pull out of thin air is a great screenplay, a really great screenplay, right? And bonus points if it's one that can be made for less than $100 million. The costs really do come back to haunt you, and it is the silent killer of projects. Like there's a lot of stuff out there in the studio world and the independent world that once people read it and they're like, oh, this is going to be expensive, they just kind of get killed. So, but yeah, a great script in the right genre is powerful, always in demand.
Nice.
Wow. Love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people find you if they want to,
reach out,
figure out, reach out more. Yeah, exactly. Harass you and find out more about what's going on.
Yeah. So I'm probably most active on TikTok at Micah Haley and Instagram at It's Micah Haley. Active there for sure. And I have an email list. I have an email list that's pretty active, and jump on it. You'll get all kinds of stuff. Yesterday you got an ode to Val Kilmer, but I also do, just whenever I have time, no promises. There are big intermittent gaps between these. There might be 3-6 months in between when I do one, but whenever I'm bored and I have a Saturday morning, I'll jump on a Zoom for 2 or 3 hours and talk about whatever, finance, casting, et cetera, et cetera. So,
love it.
That's awesome.
Sick.
Well, thanks so much for coming on and and basically closing the gap between filmmakers and the actual movies.
I'm trying. I just want everybody to make more movies.
Yeah.
On their terms.
Yeah.
That's the goal, is just get more stuff made. We haven't made enough movies in the last couple of years, so we got to get that train started again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it.
I totally agree. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and I'm sure we'll probably talk soon.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
That's a wrap for today's Lot1 Podcast episode. Thank you so much to our guest, Micah Haley. You really knocked our socks off with that one. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts or watch them. Huge thanks to our producer, Mina Vazirian. You rock, dude! And shout out to today's sponsor, Tourist Hat Coffee Company. They make some pretty good coffee, so you might as well check them out. Make sure to check us out at Instagram and TikTok at the Lot1 Podcast. That's the LOT number 1 podcast. And also check us out on lot1productions.com to see all of the fun stuff we've got going on. All right, today's film lingo of the day is sticks. Huh? Right? Sticks? We all know what sticks is. Sticks are...
They come from trees.
Tripod, exactly right. They come from trees. Also, aka tripod legs. So if you say, "Hey, can you bring me a set of sticks?" they're asking you to bring the tripod to their location. So there you have it. Anyways, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Cut. Print.